morning, Redeemers. We are so grateful that you are all joining us today for service. If this is your first time here, a special welcome to you. I'd like to invite you to fill out what we call our communication card, and you can find this under the seat in front of you. Fill it out, turn it in at the offering receptacle on your way out after service, and this is just a great way for us to get to know you and for you to get to know us as we will be sending updates throughout the week. You can also fill out this form at redeemerschurch.com/new, and also on that page you can learn various things about Redeemers Church as well. If this is your first time here and you fill out the communication card, you will receive a free drink from Missio Dei Cafe. You could either turn in the card at Missio Dei, or you could take a screenshot if you fill out the card online and turn that in there. We also have a Redeemers Church app, so if you have not downloaded that yet, I invite you to pull out your phones right now, go to redeemerschurch.com, and on the homepage you can scroll down and there is a link for you to access our app there. You can access today's notes on the app, keep up with events and things happening throughout the week, and you can also give online through the app. Some other ways that you can give at your convenience is through our offering receptacle that you can find after service, as well as our text to give feature. Again, we are so grateful that you are all here today.
Baptism is a symbol of what Jesus did for us
in his death, burial, and resurrection.
Being lowered in the water represents our old life dying.
Just as Jesus was dead and buried,
our past and future sins are gone forever.
We are forgiven.
When we are raised out of the water,
it represents our new life in Christ.
Just as Jesus was resurrected, we are a new creation.
The old is gone. The new has come.
Today
we celebrate as people take their next step and tell the world that Jesus has brought them from death to life.
Today we celebrate the miracle of a changed life
based upon their profession in Jesus Christ.
In the name of the Father,
the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we are buried with Christ
and raised to walk
in newness of life.
Good morning, Redeemers. My name is Maribel Herrera, and I'm here to announce to you some ways that you can grow in our 5 C's pathway. One of our 5 C's is compassion, and how can you grow in compassion? By serving others. Our children's ministry is ever growing, and that's such a blessing. And we have a place for you if you would like to serve in check-in, 4-5 boys, nursery. You can greet parents, you can change diapers, you can teach lessons. There's so many opportunities to get involved. Another way that you can grow in compassion is by joining our outreach team. If you have a heart for serving others, for community, for neighborhoods, for meeting people where they are, then you would be a great fit for our outreach team. Through this year, we have several outreach events, opportunities for people to get involved. So if this is where your heart is, just like mine, then please come and be a part of our outreach team.
Good morning, Redeemers. These are the people who have no place to go this weekend, right? No, this is the only place to go every weekend. My name is Matt Harder. I am the Director of Operations and Congregational Care here at Redeemers Church. I have the pleasure of bringing you the preach this morning. You might know me as that guy lurking along the side of the church, counting you and looking you in the eyes every single Sunday. I don't know who's doing it this now, but anyways, nobody knows how many people are here. So before, I'm going to obviously talk for a little bit, so let's get this thing started by standing for the reading of the word. Would you please stand with me? We're in Acts 8, chapter or verse 1 through 8. So Saul, it's on the screen so you follow along. Saul was one of the witnesses, and he agreed completely with the killing of Stephen. A great wave of persecution began that day, sweeping over the church in Jerusalem, and all the believers except the apostles were scattered through the region of Judea and Samaria. Some devout men came and buried Stephen with great mourning, but Saul was going everywhere to destroy the church. He went from house to house, dragging out both men and women to throw them into prison. But the believers who were scattered preached the good news about Jesus wherever they went. Philip, for example, went to the city of Samaria and told the people there about the Messiah. Crowds listened intently to Philip because they were eager to hear his message and see the miraculous signs he did. Many evil spirits were cast out, screaming as they left their victims, and many who had been paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in that city. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. And so the title of this preach is Bad News Spreads. Good. And it's a little bit of an inside joke for as staff. I'm going to pull back the veil and show you guys what a great time we have here every day. Sometimes it comes at the expense of us or because of something we've done, but that's okay. So I've been working here full-time for about a year and a half. I started in September of 2019. So I haven't been here all that long, but when I first started, it was like the first week that I had been here. And so I didn't know the staff. I knew the people on staff, but I didn't know them extremely well. And so we were in one of the first meetings. This is with the staff. This is with overseers, the elite of our church. That's a joke. They're just like us, which they are. And so the leaders of the church, and I wanted to impress these people. So we in this meeting, we're talking about stuff that I am going to be heading up. So it's kind of an important meeting. And biblically, to appear wise, I kept my mouth shut for the whole entire time. I didn't want people to know. I maybe didn't know exactly what I was talking about. But the meeting is coming to an end. Everything's kind of quieting down. I see my opportunity. This is my chance to impress everyone. And I don't have anything, but I figure if I start talking, something great is going to come out, right? These profound words are going to come to me. So I just started talking. I think all these plans that we're talking about are great. We are really going to be able to build something. And then I stop because I don't know what word to use. I want something profound, something that's going to be impressive, something that's going to just blow them away. Good. And everybody keeps looking at me like I have more to say. Matt's got to have something more to say, right? No, I didn't. That was it. That was the extent of what I came up with. And for a little bit, everybody just looking. Nick goes, well, Matt, that sounds good. And I was embarrassed. I was extremely embarrassed. I wanted these people, but my fear was that these people that were all, the people that hiring me, they're going to find out that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I don't have these profound words. It's funny. Now it's funny, but at the time I was pretty embarrassed. My perception is always that these people are going to find out how unqualified for the job I am. And this was going to be that indication. This is going to show them that they had made a mistake. If I had let those thoughts get into my head and let those things if I had just kept them in, maybe the jokes are the good thing because everybody knows what's going on, right? And I would have quit right then. I can't go on. Everybody knows. But look, I kept going, and I got a great sermon title out of it and a great story to start the sermon with. So everything works out great in the end. The reality is that my qualifications are not found in the profound things I say. That might come as shock to some of you, and it might be you might know this already. Yeah, see? My qualifications to work here come in a different way. It may surprise you that I have never aspired to work at a church. I didn't think I would. I didn't want to end up like this. That sounds horrible. but it kind of leads to the truth. Most of my life was, as a matter of fact, most of my life was spent trying to get as far away from church as possible. I grew up in church. I went there till I was about 18. Then I made a deliberate move away from God. Some stuff happened in the middle of there. But it must have worked out because I ended up here. So everything works out for good. The end. Right? See, that story that I just finished about the bad news, ultimately it really didn't amount to much. But at the time it was huge. And the bigger the bad news story, though, the more we all pay attention. We like bad news. We all gravitate towards bad news, right? For some reason, we enjoy fails. Whenever I go on YouTube, I get stuck on the kids riding their bikes into the mailboxes. Or the guys on those little hoverboard things, and they're falling over all everywhere. Falling in any way. I just like to watch them fall. And I can't be the only ones because they're everywhere. We watch this stuff. An article on negativity in the news says that 95% of media headlines are negative. The evening news is filled with one bad story after another, and it's no secret that these things are driven by ratings. We watch it. The headline is intentionally bad to draw our attention, which brings bigger audience and more money for those stations. They always stick the feel-good stuff. You know the stuff where somebody pays it forward in a Starbucks line or they crawled up a tree and saved a kitten? That's a minute at the very end. And it's because we don't care. The fact that somebody is good for 1,000 days in a row, who cares? I want to hear about the one day he's not okay. I want to know what happened to him on that day. So recently there was a website that ran an experiment, and they ran positive stories for a week. They wanted to see what would happen to their viewers if they did that. And they lost 65% of their viewership over that week because nobody wanted to see the positive stories. They all wanted to see the negative. And there's something called negativity bias, and very simply, this is the fact that we respond to threats. As humans, we're always looking for something that's going to affect us negatively, so we gravitate towards negative stuff. We pay attention when it's negative. When you're comfortable, are you comfortable? We just don't listen when we're comfortable. You might not be listening now if you're too comfortable. But we don't pay attention to the good stuff. If it bleeds, it leads. Especially on social media, you know, we share the controversial posts we like and share those things, the conspiracy theories, the impending doom. And I know a lot of us try not to, but we're drawn to it. We can't help ourselves. And then we argue over it in those comment sections below, and we see those arguments going, oh, I got to respond. We got drawn into natural disasters. For some reason, we're fascinated by the latest celebrities or the politicians' indiscretions. We get whole news shows and almost whole cable networks based on the bad stuff. And it's not because we're not watching. Since we like and share those bad stories, the algorithm on Facebook and other social media, it sends us more of the same. The bad news cycle just keeps repeating. Our perception is that this world is an increasingly hostile place, and that's my perception too. I feel like it is. But did you know that over the past 20 years, the violent crime rate and just the crime rate in general has gone down? It's lower than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, we used to let our kids just roam the streets till dark without any parental supervision. No cell phones either. Nobody knew where these guys were. Nobody knew where I was, I guess. Now I don't even let my kids go to the corner without following them or just keeping my eye on, where are they okay? Where do they go? It's been a minute, and oh no, they're gone. I better text them. But even though I am telling you that you're safer, what's the first response? Oh, that can't be true. I'm going to find something that's the opposite on my phone. You know, I bet you I can find a news source that says the opposite. We're all going to die. Our perceptions are skewed. We focus on the bad news, and no news is good news. This extends to our personal lives as well. It seems we have to constantly try and get our mind focused back on the good in our lives, that attitude of gratitude. You know, you hear it, right? That we have a positive attitude, even in the midst of hard times. And it's hard because it seems like one bad thing happens after another. And it's difficult to see the good news through the bad. And when the hard times comes, it's almost impossible to see that anything good could ever come from it, right? Nothing good could ever come out of this. I just got to get through it. The beginning of this passage is a lot like that. It seems like all bad news. We have just witnessed the killing of Stephen by the Jewish leaders. In Acts 8:1-3, right away we're introduced to Saul, who's Paul. And it says Saul agrees with the killing of Stephen completely. And Saul was a Pharisee. These are the guys that put Jesus to death. And so he's listening to Stephen lay out the entire Old Testament right in front of him. He's making all the connections, pointing to how the Messiah has come and Jesus is him. And he can't refute it, and it makes him mad. He doesn't want to hear that. He doesn't want to hear the good news. So they put their hands over their ears, and it says they drag him out and they stone him. They had had enough of this. They killed Jesus, and it wasn't enough to stop the movement. They killed Stephen, it wasn't enough to stop the movement. So now they're going to, it's almost like with this, the floodgates of their anger are opened up, and now they're going to just start going from place to place, rounding up these people, killing them or throwing them in jail. This killing sets off a wave of persecution unlike we have ever seen. This isn't persecution like we perceive it, like you got to bake a cake for someone. This is round them up and get rid of them now. Saul starts going around tearing followers of Jesus out of their homes. We have small groups that meet on a weekly basis, right? Imagine you're sitting there around the coffee table in the living room and enjoying your dessert. I don't know what you guys do in your small group, but you hear a knock on the door and then a battering ram rams through the door, and you're dragged out as a group and you're thrown on the lawn. And maybe you're stoned right there. Maybe if you're lucky, you get thrown in jail, never to be heard from again. This is what Saul was doing. He was going door to door, searching for the believers, the small churches, taking them out of their homes, all in an attempt to destroy the church and stop the movement. He wanted to kill all of them, catch all of them. We've heard about the stories like how the Romans, everybody knows what Romans persecuting Christians like in the Colosseums and all that stuff looks like. This is Jewish leaders doing this to Jewish people. This is Jewish people doing this to Jewish people. And I hardly think that when any of them are running from their homeland, they're going, this will probably be fun. It's all going to work out. No, they can't see good coming from this bad. There is no way that persecution ever is good. And Acts 8:4 tells us that the believers are scattered. The word here is diaspora in Greek, which means to sow over. And that is a term commonly used to tell about displaced people. Refer to displaced people who are chased out of their homeland. Either maybe it's through a persecution like this. Maybe it's through a war that doesn't even involve them. They're just fighting and they just keep getting bombed and then they're in the middle and they got to run for their lives. Every day it seems like that is the headline news. It has been for a while, and we pay attention to that stuff. Usually the spin, though, is that how bad it is, not how bad it is for them, but how bad it is going to be for us if they ever reach our country, right? That's why we pay attention, because of the negative news that it might affect us. That's a side note, but anyways, I thought I'd throw it in. The believers are chased out. In chapter 9, Saul is going after them, uttering murderous threats with every breath. This is that news. And I know we don't like it. I know we say we don't like it, but we're drawn to it. We probably don't like it, but we're drawn. When we see this kind of suffering, we want to do something. When we hear about other people's hard times, we listen, and our hearts go out, and we hear their struggles, and we say, what can I do? Our heart breaks for that stuff. And we're always saying, what can I do? And we love to hear other people's, but we're happy, you know? But we're not happy about the news, but we're happy that we're sharing it with us. Bad news spreads good. So good, I got to get as much time out of that little saying as possible. But have you ever had something so bad happen to you that you just didn't want anybody to find out? I mean, we're appreciative when somebody else confides with their stuff. But if it's my stuff, I don't want anybody to know this stuff. That's because bad news scatters, and when it happens to us, we try to restrict it. When it happens to us, we cover it up. I mean, we're so scared that if one person finds out something about us, then everybody's going to know right away, right? That's because even in church, or maybe especially in church sometimes, we gossip about one another. Did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear what they're into? Did you hear about their kids? That's the one I hear. Did you hear about their kids, what they did? Not really. I said that in first service. They weren't here, but now they're sitting right there, so I better watch it. So let's watch this. Let's play a game. Look at your neighbor, turn to your neighbor. Now tell them your deepest, darkest secret. We'll see how long it takes to get around. I know Greg. Some of you are open books. You are doing it. Don't do it. I'm not suggesting that everybody, some of you are like, heck no, I'm not doing that. But some of you are all, it's okay. But I'm not suggesting that everybody turns to their neighbor and just shouts out their bad news. But we don't share it with anyone ever. I mean, even our closest friends, our most trusted friends, even our spouses sometimes don't know this stuff. Stuff from our past, infidelity or abuse, we keep it to ourselves. the addictions, the financial trouble, job loss, grief, disappointment, sickness, all of that. The list goes on of the stuff that we don't want people to know. We want people to know the good stuff, but we want to hide all the bad stuff. We do it for a lot of reasons, but when we do, we isolate ourselves from people that could actually support us. Our perception is that if they find out we're going to be viewed as charity cases, as weak, unqualified for the job, they're not going to respect me if they knew that I got nothing. We want people to think that we have it all under control, and as a result, we feel like we're the only ones going through the bad times. And when in reality, we all go through bad stuff. Everyone. I mean, if you have it under control, you're in the minority. And you know, guys know, and I know some of you don't have it under control. You're only as sick as your secrets, and you're not alone. We're all sick in here. Own bad news. Just one chapter later, we see a dramatic conversion. Jesus visits him on the road to Damascus in a blinding light and a voice from heaven. And his life is completely changed forever. And now he's part of the movement that he was just persecuting. And that's good news. But Saul has his reputation to contend with. I mean, he is known for the persecution. And as a result of that, all of these people that are being scattered over the region, as fast as they're being scattered, so is his reputation for persecution. Everybody's talking about it. I mean, he's struck blind by that blinding white light. He's led into Damascus. He's taken to a place. And God appears to this man called Ananias in a vision and goes, Ananias, I need you to go visit Paul because he's on our side now. And Ananias goes, I don't think so, Lord. I'm pretty sure that that's the guy that I need to stay away from. That he goes to Jerusalem. The disciples are scared of him. Every town he goes into, people are scared of him because of his reputation. And his past catches up with him. And this is the kind of news that you can't hide from. That's to contend with. Everyone knows what Paul has done, and he has to deal with it. Maybe that's why we don't want to share with people what we have done, because we might have to deal with it, right? We think that our stuff is going to cause people to look at us funny. For what Paul has done, there's no coming back from. Nothing good can come from it. And we all have that stuff. We try to cover it up, but it doesn't help the problem. It actually makes it worse. I ran through my story at the beginning, and I left out a lot of the middle stuff. That's intentional. I don't want you to know my stuff. It's that stuff that I'm holding on to. The stuff that really makes me unqualified. The stuff that if you knew, I'm really unqualified to be where I'm at right now. They're my secrets, and I want to keep them that way. I tell you just enough, just a little bit of what you want to hear, keeping as much of my information private as possible, right? I mean, ask me how I'm doing. Thank you very much. Thanks for asking. I'm fine. I'm good. We did it this morning, right? How many times did you say, I'm fine, it's all going good? As you're walking in and people are asking you how it's going. This is what we say. We're all that way. We all say, I'm fine. We just don't want people to know. Maybe we just don't want people to know the things that are past, but we also don't want them to know the stuff in our present, maybe the stuff that we're currently involved in, the stuff that we're in the middle of right now. I'll let you know all the good stuff, but I'm going to restrict as much bad news as possible. We know that we're in the same building. We're in the same town. We're in the same state. We're in the same country. And we think that our stuff is so unique. I'm the only one going through this stuff. And the fact that we keep it all restricted, it just adds to that. I'm the only one. I'm the worst. If you knew where I had been, you know what I had done, you would not want me around. And we hold it inside, and that we don't let anyone know. I struggle with anxiety and depression to some degree. Anxiety a lot. And I'm scared to let you know that I have a bit of it right now. I had a bit of it this morning, that tight feeling in your chest that you just can't get rid of. But I don't want to tell you that because I want to appear like I have got it going on. I'll tell you right now, I don't have it all going on. I'm not under control. My head is going crazy right now. But I want to appear. That's why I try to look so nice, because if I do that, it'll distract you from the fact that I don't know, it's not always what I'm talking about, right? Those things we keep inside are allowed to fester and grow in order to keep us, but in order to get help, we have to tell someone. But if we tell someone, they're going to know who we are, the real us. And when we aren't getting help, and those things are just ours to handle by ourselves, the bad news seems overwhelming. One of the worst places I can be, like in this spinning head. If I get stuck there, all of those things that I thought, maybe there were little things like that thing that I started with, or maybe there are big things, but they get bigger and embellished, and I play them over and over again in my head, and I sink, and that feeling of hope that I once had, it disappears. I can't see anything good on the horizon. I can't see anything coming. I left off in the middle of the story because that's where my struggles are. But when we are all in the middle of stuff, we are unable to see how the story turns out. We can't see the whole picture yet, but that's where the hope is. The fact that the bad stuff we experience actually can be used for good, but we don't believe it when we're in it, right? Nothing good can come from this. It's impossible to believe that anything like the stuff we're talking about, the stuff that we've been through, the stuff that you've been through, I've been through, anything good comes from it. And we're doing an emotionally healthy spirituality class on Wellness Monday, 6:30 every Monday night, right in this room, even on holidays. That's right, we are hardcore around there. And right now, we have a story about perspective. And it's going to be on your screen. You follow along. I'd like to read it. It pertains to this. There is a story about a wise man living on one of China's vast frontiers. One day, for no apparent reason, a young man's horse ran away and was taken by nomads across the border. Everyone tried to offer consolation for the man's bad fortune. But his father, a wise man, said, "What makes you so sure this is not a blessing?" Months later, his horse returned, bringing with her a magnificent stallion. This time, everyone was full of congratulations on his son's good fortune. Now, his father said, "What makes you so sure this isn't a disaster?" Their household was made richer by this find, and the son loved to ride. But one day he fell off his horse and broke his hip. Once again, everyone offered their consolation for his bad luck. But his father said, "What makes you so sure this isn't a blessing?" A year later, nomads invaded across the border, and every able-bodied man was required to take up his bow and go into battle. The Chinese families living on that border lost 9 out of every 10 men. Only because the son was lame did the father and son survive to take care of each other. See, what appears like a blessing and success has often turned out to be a terrible thing. What appears to be a terrible event has often turned out to be a rich blessing. This is how bad news can spread the good news. You see, just like those seeds being scattered, the diaspora that we were talking about before, the believers are scattered among the region. And with them, Jesus' message is also scattered out among the region. Way back in Acts 1, we hear Jesus telling his disciples, "You are going to be my witnesses to the ends of the earth," but they don't leave Jerusalem. They all stay right where they are because they're comfortable. Maybe they're comfortable, they're not listening, right? They have to be dispersed in order for the message to grow. Seeds don't grow right when they're left in one spot. I have a garden, and if I dig one little hole and I dump the seeds in there, what's going to happen? I mean, really, I don't know what's going to happen. I've never done that before. But if you have, I would imagine, I'm not a farmer either, so I don't know. But I would imagine that they choke each other out. I would imagine that the fruit is small. I would imagine that it doesn't work that way. Seeds have to be scattered to be able to grow right. The persecution spreads Philip and the believers. They left their homes and carried with them the message about the Messiah, but they didn't grumble, they didn't protest, they didn't take up signs, march the streets, they didn't fight, they didn't hide, they didn't look for the next great elected official that they could get into the office so that they wouldn't have to deal with it. They preached. Acts 8, 6-8 says the people listened intently. When they got to the cities that they were going, they preached, and the people listened intently and were eager to hear the message. Evil spirits were cast out and paralyzed were healed. There was great joy in that city because even in the midst of the persecution, the people kept preaching the message. They stayed focused. And though through persecution, they were scattered as far as Antioch. Antioch was the church that sent Paul out on his first missionary journey to the Gentiles. Through Paul's persecution, the believers are scattered. They set up a church. Paul is converted. He goes to Antioch. And because of that bad story, he is the reason we get to do a lot of what we do here. That's when the message started moving. This is the moment in time that carried the gospel all over the world. But it doesn't look like we think it should, right? There's got to be a different way. If we didn't have the whole story, we would look at this. If I had stopped right at the first verses, you would say, that's a horrible event. Why is that in the Bible? But the Bible's full of a lot of stuff. That's horrible, but we've got the whole story. When we see it all together, we see that the best news comes from bad news. Stephen's death spreads Paul's ministry, and I'm sure Stephen's death weighed heavy on Paul. And I know it's only a couple paragraphs mentions in the Bible, but Paul spends time talking about this stuff. He doesn't try to conceal it. I mean, he can't hardly, right? Because his reputation is out there, but he faces it head on when he's confronted by it. In Galatians, he says, I violently persecuted God's church. He admits it. I did my best to destroy it. He addresses a crowd when he's arrested in Jerusalem and tells them, yes, I persecuted the followers of the way, hounded some to death, arresting both men and women, and throwing them into prison. I mean, everywhere he goes, whenever he's confronted with it, he faces it. And later on, he finds himself, it says of himself, I am the worst of sinners. Paul didn't, and the people that he was running into did not consider him savable, unsavable. He's one of those guys that cannot be changed. Unworthy of God's grace. I mean, Paul says that over and over. I am not worthy of God's grace. But God didn't see it that way. Whenever he went, the people were scared. But in chapter 9, when they heard him speak, they were amazed. It says the word amazed. Isn't this the same man who caused such devastation among Jesus' followers in Jerusalem? They couldn't believe that someone who had done what he did had the words that he had and was spreading the message that he was spreading. And it was something that only God can do, right? Only an encounter with Jesus can change somebody like that. This. God's power was shown through Paul's bad story. The great news about bad news is that when God renews, it spreads the good news. Tongue twister. I got it right, though. So let me tell you another story. This is my Facebook story. This is the one I kind of led with. But I grew up. I went to a Christian high school. I got married. I had 2 kids. I had a successful business. God called me to ministry. I was hired at the first church I applied at. The end. It's perfect. That's an awesome story. Not my story. Parts of it are, but it's a great one. See, there is a whole story. I grew up in a church, and I went to a Christian high school, but I thought, I could find a better way. I don't need God in my life. And if he was even real at that time, I knew that he didn't care about me. I didn't feel it. I mean, I wasn't looking for it necessarily either, but I didn't feel it. Even before I left church, I was involved in drugs and alcohol from a young age. It started as a way to deal with anxiety, the kind of anxiety that we all face probably at that age, but it's a way to fit in. And my social anxiety is so bad, like, now I've got a toolbox and I've got a plan for it, but at that time I didn't know what to do with it. So I coped. And my addiction, and it grew from just occasional use to an addiction. I got married, I had 2 boys. My alcohol use got worse to the point when I was drinking every day, and it can be an understatement. Every day was an understatement. Every day, all day. I got angry. I was angry, sometimes violent. Not towards my wife so much, but I can't say that it's not part of the story. I have to face the stuff where I've come from, what things in my life. The house took a lot of abuse. I will that throwing things, arguing. My wife and I fought constantly, and it usually led me to do something that really scared her. I had no off switch on my emotions and would be verbally abusive to everyone all the time. And my wife finally left me. Because I was drinking all the time, I wasn't allowed to drive my kids. Don't put those kids in a car, we'll call the cops. At one point, I was hardly able to see them unsupervised. They wanted to know what we were doing because I was acting crazy. We were headed for divorce. There's no reason we should be married. I started a successful business with my dad, and it's going great. 2009, there's a downturn in the economy, which allows me even more time, more downtime to drink, more depression because of the things that are going on in my life, and I go down further. And my drinking ran that business straight into the ground. A successful business that was doing well, straight into the ground. Bills were piling up. We're about to lose the house. No reason we should have that house. My mom was left to be the go-between between my wife and I. I got kicked out of my house and I moved to their house. Oh, good. Imagine what the thought is as I got deeper and deeper into my addiction and depression down there watching this. I mean, my dad would stay home from work, watch me as I detoxed. As soon as he'd leave, I'd go back to the store. I couldn't stop. No matter what I did, I couldn't get sober on my own, but I wanted to. I didn't want you to know what was going on in my life. I wanted to hold it inside. I've got it all together. Visibly, I obviously don't have it all together, but I want you to think, I'm going to say the words, I got it all going on. I got it all together. I'm not sure, I haven't been there. Hopefully I don't have to go there, but what is it like to be standing by and watch your son or daughter or family member self-destruct before your eyes and you don't know what to do? Well, I know my family, and I know a lot of other families trying not to let anybody know. My wife making excuses for me wherever I'm at or what I'm doing or how I acted on a weekend night or, hey, how's Matt doing? Hey, he's fine. He's good. Covering it up, not wanting anybody to know, and allowing that disease to fester and grow inside of us. Every relationship I had was disappearing. Tired of the drama, maybe they were. I was just pushing people away because if they got close, they obviously knew what was going on. But somewhere along the line, my parents started to reach out. I know this. I talked to my mom about this yesterday. Somewhere along the line, they reached out, and her words were, we just needed somebody to pray. Finally, after bearing it for so long, we just need somebody. We need to tell somebody. They went to an AA meeting, and some lady gave them a Bible that I still have. It's in my office. I should have brought it. It's in my office. And I read that thing. It was integral to my early recovery, and it got there because they reached out for help. And they just needed someone to pray, so they told their Sunday school class. They told family, finally. All these people started praying. Somebody told my grandma, and she starts praying for me and talking to me about my drinking. I didn't tell my grandma, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. But all these people are praying. And I think they agree. I know they do because I talked to her yesterday. That prayer and support made all the difference in their life. They stopped holding it inside. They stopped keeping it to themselves. They reached out. And even if it's a family member or somebody else that's going through it, we reach out, we share with somebody, we get the support, we get prayer, we get the things we need because we can't do it all by ourselves. We try to hold on to that bad news. And if we do that, only more bad news is coming. I remember those last days, I tried to get sober over and over and over again. I was by myself, in the dark, drunk, in the fetal position in a corner somewhere. And I cried out to God to save me. I don't think I've ever cried out with that amount of, God, I need you. Kill me, save me, do something. I can't stay here anymore. And it wasn't a dramatic, there wasn't a light. There wasn't a voice from heaven. Not much changed at that moment, except I didn't know what God was preparing behind the scenes. That was when the best thing that ever happened to me happened. I was involved in a DUI accident. I hit somebody driving, and I went to jail. That's not an easy thing to say in a crowd of people who, it's not a recovery crowd like I'm used to. Saying this out in the open public, and I mean, it's not an easy thing to admit that I'm driving drunk. I could have killed somebody. It's affecting millions of people in a negative way. I know that. I don't say it lightly. I say it with all the, it weighs, and I have to deal with that. I can't turn away from it. It's part of the story. How can we imagine something like that being a good thing? That's my past. It's a horrible thing that God used for good. Jail was exactly where I needed to be. God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. He was separating me from the situation. And there's a lot of stuff that happened after that. That was God's hand moving in different parts of my life. He was putting the pieces back together, leading me down those roads. That's where God found me. That's what God did. In the worst bad place of my life, the worst bad news in my entire life, the worst maybe of my family's life. When I had had enough and was willing, God was there for me. God cared about me. Even in the midst of who I was, what I had done, what I was still doing, God was there. And at that time, I could never see how that bad stuff could turn into good stuff. I could never see how something good can come from it. I was finally willing to reach out for help. I mean, it was a little bit of prompting from the authorities and from the courts, but I went to rehab. I participated. I started attending Celebrate Recovery at this church. I shared with people what was going on. I stopped trying to do it all on my own. I stayed involved in the programs. I started to come to church here, and through seeking God, he removed that obsession to use alcohol, something I couldn't do by myself. Only God can take something that was so bad and make it good. Take it from that and make it this. He brought people that were willing to talk and walk with me through the anxiety and the depression. Through a relationship with God, he healed my marriage. He took a family that wasn't going to church. I had been to church at 18. Sunshine hasn't been to church. I mean, didn't grow up in church. My boys certainly had, and I wouldn't allow it. I didn't want them here. He took the events that happened, the things that started on those days, and he took a family and he brought them into his family. My whole family was baptized right here at this church. He saved my family through such bad times. Like I said, I didn't have this spectacular conversion like Paul did. I went through the hard time that is recovery. It is hard to get help. But it's the times that shaped me and gave me purpose. I had to go through it to be able to do what God wanted me to do. What qualifies me is not my profound words. What unqualifies me is not the fact that I stumble through all these words either here on the page. It is the profound difference that Jesus has made in my life and my desire to see him change other people's lives the same way. That's what qualifies me. Amen. My Facebook story is a nice story. You probably got one. It's probably on Facebook. But it's just that. It's a story. My whole story shows God's power through the bad news. Your whole story shows God's power through the bad news. Our struggles spread the gospel. That is the good news. God's power is shown when we share the bad with the people around us. Whether it's sharing the bad with somebody who needs to hear it and they're in the middle of it and we need to pull them out, or whether it's somebody that, or maybe it's somebody you're in the middle of it now and you need to share it to be able to get the help that you need. That's my story, and it's not just mine. There are people that have gone through rough times, people who are in the middle of their story and couldn't see how God could make it any better. They've reached out, they've stopped trying to do it on their own, and came to realize that the worst thing that ever happened to them is the best thing that ever happened to them. I mean, we keep it to ourselves and we think nobody else could ever go through it. Like I said, one of the best things that I get to do on a Monday night, 6:30, Celebrate Recovery every Monday night, is sit across from somebody, sit there in chairs and looking at each other. I get to listen to their story. I get to share with them a little bit of mine, and they look back, and it's happened a lot of times. I didn't think anybody could understand what I was going through. I didn't think anybody cared enough to listen. But we do. My story is one of addiction, but it's not just that stuff that we deal with on those kind of nights. Celebrate Recovery deals with stuff like pornography and sexual purity, codependency, food issues, workaholism. We have expanded this group to include emotionally healthy spirituality, emotionally healthy relationships, not just for married couples either, just relationships in general. Healing relationships. I mean, we're not doing this because nobody needs it. There's 75 people on this campus on a Monday night. Learning to reach out and not conceal the bad news in their life. Sharing it with each other. Finding healing through the support. Sharing good news from the bad is contagious. It is the spreads the good news. There's one more story. I want to share with you this morning. It's the worst one. It's the same one that the believers have been sharing for centuries. It's the one that they shared when they got thrown out of their homeland, when they had to go to the new places, when they walked in there. The same story that they were preaching. It is this: in his infinite love for us, God sent his only son to die on the cross for our sins. God abandoned his son on that cross so he may take on the sins of the world and die so that we could live. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. It's the first verse we learned. It's back to the basics. That's not how the God of the universe goes out, right? That's not how the disciples saw it. In the worst place of their life, in the darkness where nothing seems like it's going to come, nothing good can come from this. But they can't see the whole story. That's not the whole story. The greatest news comes from the greatest bad. On the third day, God raised him from the dead, proving that Jesus was who he said he was, God's son, and death could not hold him. It is by the power that we are saved. It is by that power that we are changed. That's the end of our story. No matter where you are in the middle of whatever you're struggling with, whatever wall you've hit, whatever something bad news has happened, the end of our story is that we're saved. That God can change that bad stuff to the ultimate good stuff. When we are in the middle of the hard times, they focused like Philip and the believers. They kept preaching, they carried the message, and now as a result, we're part of it. That message reached all the way to us. We are the believers in the middle of hard times. We need to stay focused. We need to preach. We share our bad news. We carry the message, and we go to the ends of the earth. At least to the end of the block. It's like that wise man's story. What appeared to be a terrible event turned out to be a richest blessing. Let's pray. Dear God, it's a hard one. When we pray and we say, thank you for the bad news. Thank you for the hard times. Thank you for the stuff that we can't do without you. Maybe it's that one thing that we face that we say, God, I can't do it without you. The one thing that brings us to our knees that we can't do ourselves. Or maybe it's just a pile of stuff when we see no way out. God, whatever we're in the middle of, I pray that you would, and I know you do, you show up. Thank you. God, I thank you for this place, that we have people that we can share our story with, that we can share our bad news with, and we have the support. God, I thank you so much for intervening in those bad news stories. Thank you so much. Let us go out and share the news, the bad news leads to the good news, and just spread your message. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.